Welcome to our second video class. I hope you'll have a little bit of fun on this snowy day. We're having three sections of today's class session. In the first session, which is this one, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the fine points of your essay, specifically the works cited page and how to do parenthetical citations. I'll also give you some pointers on common mistakes that students make in the hope that you will be able to avoid them in your paper as well. And then in the next two segments, we'll go over the readings that you had for homework. So let's start with the works cited page. Yes, you have to do one. It doesn't have to be on a separate piece of paper. If you have room at the end of your very last page, you can put it there. But you do need to have it because you are going to be including parenthetical citations, and you will be graded on doing the parenthetical citations. So I know that you want to do them. So let's start with the works cited because you have to have that first before you can do the parentheticals. I know that you're all familiar from high school with EasyBib. The only thing to remember when accessing EasyBib is that we are using the MLA guidelines. That's Modern Language Association. So you simply type in the name of the work. In this case, you have to make sure that it is the Robert Fagles translation because he will get credit in your version that you're going to put on the works cited page, and you just copy it right on over. If you're using SparkNotes is very kind. If you look on the left side of the page near the bottom, you'll see a box, a sort of menu box on the left side of the page. Near the bottom, I think it's the last entry, it says how to cite this page. You click on it and it produces a new page that gives the citation in all the different professional formats. So you simply choose the MLA format, copy and paste it onto your works cited page. So that's very, very simple. If you use a different online source, most of the other online sources do not do that handy little here's how to cite me. So you'll need to use the MLA guidelines. Just to remind you, under writing aids on our Blackboard page, I have posted a link to an online version of the MLA guidelines. When you click that link, there will be a menu page on the left, and you'll see the choices include different types of citations, including electronic sources. So if you're using an online source, you simply click on citations or electronic sources, and it will show you exactly how to do it. MLA guidelines currently do not include the URL, so you don't have to put the web address. The reason for that is that web addresses change very frequently, so you're simply going to use the .com and not the specific page. There may be cases where you have more than one page from the same source. Let's just take SparkNotes as an example. You may be looking, for example, at the character analysis of Penelope, and then you may be looking at the summary for book 8. So those will actually be separate entries. You could have more than one SparkNotes entry, you could have more than one Schmoop entry. So it's going to be a little bit challenging to manage that, but I'm here to help you. That takes care of your works cited page. Now, the challenge is how to cite within the text. These are in-text citations. Not only do you need to do this with quotes, which we've discussed before you're going to minimize, but when you paraphrase, when you tell a portion of the story, when you say, Odysseus ran into the Cyclops and here's what happened, or Odysseus lived with Circe for a year, your reader, if you were to publish this article, might want to cross-check that. Might say, wow, that's really interesting. I want to read that whole section. Or might say, wait a minute, that's not how I remember it. I want to cross-check this. So you have to prove where you got this in the text so that you can be cross-checked. And it's actually pretty easy to do. So I've done a live example for you with squiggles instead of text. So let's say that you're writing along, la 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 la, you give your summary, and then at the end of your summary, you're going to tell your reader where you got that. So the first thing you put is the author's name, in this case, obviously Homer. Because we're dealing with a poem, we use line numbers. Now, normally poems just start with line number 1 and go to whatever number. The problem is that in the Odyssey, because it's such a long work, we actually have multiple books, and the books start over with new line numbers. So the only way to manage that is that you cite both the book and the line number. But because MLA wants you to do minimal disruption to your text, you're not going to write book number 9, page number, or excuse me, line number, blah, blah, blah. You're going to assume that your reader is familiar with MLA guidelines and knows what these numbers mean. So it looks like this: Homer, space, my book number in this example is 9, so you just put the digit 9, period, and then the line numbers, which usually is a line range. Now in this example, this first example, I'm doing it at the end. Let's say I've told the story, and at the end of the line I have my parenthetical and then I have my period. Let's say in my next example that I'm giving, I'm in the middle of a sentence giving a brief quote or something like that. I actually can put it in the middle of the line. Wherever you finish either paraphrasing or quoting, you put the parenthetical right there, so you can see that it's right in the middle of the line. You'll also notice that the second time, since I'm quoting from Homer a second time, my reader should be smart enough to know, bear with me on my page, that this is Homer again. So I don't need to say Homer a second time. In my third example, now I've switched to SparkNotes. If you choose to use SparkNotes, you'll see when you click and copy their how to cite this article, you'll see that they don't acknowledge their individual authors. Each article is written by one or more authors, and they don't give the author's name. So they ask that you refer to them as SparkNotes editors. Now, if you choose to use more than one page from SparkNotes, you'll see that the citation is a little bit different because it will have whatever the name of that page is. So it might be character analysis Penelope, or it might be summary of book 9. So in your individual SparkNotes citations, you'll have not only SparkNotes editors, but you'll have a short title for that article. If you use more than one article, your reader doesn't know which article you're citing if you just put SparkNotes editors. So in that case, you're going to have to put SparkNotes editors, comma, and a short title to differentiate between Penelope and the summary of book 9. That's just so your reader knows in case they want to look that source up online. Then finally, since we've switched sources, we went to SparkNotes. When we come back to the text and we're citing from Homer again, obviously we have to make that transition and say, okay, back to Homer now. I hope that makes it fairly easy for you. So that's works cited and then parentheticals. Now I want to give you some hints about some things that I see happen often. Some of the biggest mistakes, these are transitions between types of writing. In high school, you may have done a lot of journal writing, or you may have done opinion pieces, that sort of reflection writing, like we do with our colloquia reflections. In that case, you could use the first person. You might say, I think, or I've noticed. We did that in our Blackboard discussion, and that's absolutely fine. But an essay, as we have discussed, is a very formal academic piece. And what you're doing is trying to prove a point. It's very much like writing a scientific article. So in that case, you're not going to refer to yourself. You're simply saying, here's the proof. You also don't refer to your reader. So if you're writing a magazine article, you'd want to engage the reader by saying, when this happens to you, you should do blah, blah, blah. That's not the case here. You don't need to say things like, as you can see. The reader can see. They don't need you to tell them. So don't refer to you, don't refer to I, don't refer to we, don't refer to us, and don't refer to reader. There are two problems with this. One is, again, it could be second person. If you're saying, as the reader will see, you're really saying, as you will see. So you're breaking the rule of not using second person. Also, the person who's reading your article may in fact not have read whatever work you're writing about. So it's kind of silly to say, as the reader will see, when the reader hasn't read it. So just remember, avoid first person, second person, and any references to the reader. Just state it as fact. Not, as you will see, Homer does this. Homer does this, period. It's very simple. You're making an argument before a court. One of the things students also struggle with is capitalization. We're used to using a big G when talking to God. But in this case, we have multiple gods and goddesses. So when you're talking about them collectively, you use the little g. The big G means that it's a name. We refer to the more modern Judeo-Christian Muslim God as God. That's the name. So it's capitalized. But when you're referring to the gods and goddesses, that's like referring to dogs and cats. So it's not capitalized. But some of the gods actually have titles. So here's an example. If you say, Poseidon is an angry god, you're describing him. So that would be a little g. But if you're using his title, he is God of the Sea. That's his title, just like President of the United States. So that's capitalized, but only capitalized when it is a title. And then finally, this is one of my pet peeves. Think about it. The top word, how do you pronounce it? Some people pronounce it lead, and some people pronounce it lead. And in fact, they're both right. The trick is, when it's pronounced lead, it's a metal. When you mean to say the past tense of lead, it's spelled LED, like the lead bulb. So this will lead him to do this, but this led Odysseus in the past tense to do whatever. Just remember, past tense LED. Okay, that concludes our overview for the fine points of essays. And stay tuned for the next link where we'll go over the homework.